Hello and a really warm welcome to the MS podcast series. I'm Nicola Graham and today we're talking about diet and multiple sclerosis. I admit, I think it's a confusing world out there in terms of what you put in your diet, what you don't include in your diet. There's lots of conflicting information, lots of myths and misunderstandings. So I'm really hoping that the podcast today is going to clear up some of those confusions for you and give you a bit of a food roadmap. I'm really delighted. My guest today is the very wonderful Jady Lam. She is a multi-talented woman. She's an MS Dietitian and she's also an exercise physiologist. So welcome, Jady.
Oh, thank you, Nicola. Thank you for having me for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be here today. Ready to share some insights into diet and MS today. So I'm really hoping I will be able to give you something to take away. And we'll go from there.
Thanks, Jady. And can you tell us a little, for our listeners, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your role at MS?
Yep. I started working at MS as an exercise physiologist almost 4 years ago. Since October last year, I've actually been involved in setting up and running the new dietitian service, which is really exciting. Prior to MS, I did work in an allied health multidisciplinary clinic. I co-facilitated a few various lifestyle programs and also worked in various medical centres. So I'm really passionate about using my skills to be able to work together with everyone to achieve their health goals.
Oh, that's great, Jady. And we're really keen to pick your brains today. So let's jump straight in. What does the research say about diet and MS? And should people with MS follow the Australian dietary guidelines?
Most research into MS and diet have actually largely been observational, small studies. Therefore, there is insufficient evidence to actually recommend any specific diets for people with MS. And a lot of high quality research is actually needed to support whether or not some of these special diets that we might see online are safe or not. Currently, the best recommendations for people with MS is actually to follow Australian dietary guidelines, which some of you might have already heard of. So what this is basically enjoying a wide range of nutritious foods from the 5 food groups. So what these 5 food groups are having plenty of vegetables, having our fruit, having our cereals and grainy-based foods. So these are basically our whole grain, rice, noodles, pastas, things like your cereals. It does include things like your lean meat and also poultry, and also vegetarian options, so things like your tofu, nuts, seeds, legumes, lentils. It does also include things like having a lot of low-fat dairy, things like your milk, yogurt, cheeses, and also their alternatives as well.
And Jady, what about then, just so we chunk it up, so there's a beautiful list of things that people can enjoy. What about things that people should consider limiting according to the guidelines?
Yep. I will say most people generally know which food we're limiting. It's all the good foods that we enjoy.
It's all the ones we love. Yeah,
definitely. It's all the ones, unfortunately, things like your biscuits, our cakes, our pastries, our processed meats, burgers, chips, a lot of our takeaway snacks. These are the foods, unfortunately, which are high in saturated fat, added salt, sugars, and also alcohol. Unfortunately, they're not very good for us for a range of different reasons, including from our weight perspective, but also from a health perspective with things like cholesterols, blood pressure, and also diabetes side of things. So these foods are what we usually say enjoy, but enjoy in very small amounts. So don't have these foods a lot of the time. And also when we take a look at these foods, limiting the amount of salt by reading food labels, limiting the amount of salt by adding less salt to food when we're cooking or after cooking. And also this includes drinks as well. So a lot of the sugar sweetened drinks, such as the cordial, fruit drinks, vitamin waters, energy and sports drinks, soft drinks are included in this category as well. So unfortunately, all the good things that we enjoy.
all the addictive things, I think, Jady. Jady, can I just take you back a moment then, just to clarify? You said saturated fats, and I'm always a little bit confused, saturated, unsaturated. Which are the ones? Yeah. Saturated, I think, are in animal products, and they're the ones that we should really limit. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And what about the good fats? What are the ones that we want to have in our diet that are healthy for us?
Yeah, definitely. So we know saturated fats are the fats which aren't very good for us. The fats which are good for us are called the mono and polyunsaturated fats. And these are the fats which are predominantly found in plant-based products. So you'll find them in a lot of the nuts and the seeds. You'll also find them in, the exception is actually things like fish, which is animal-based, but they do contain a lot of these fats. And extending this with the nuts and seeds is a lot of the oils that we might use. For example, things like your flaxseed oil, things like your sunflower oils, olive oils, canola oils, they're all plant-based. So they will definitely contain all these fats as well. Yeah.
So they'd have the beautiful fats, the good fats in them. They're the ones we want to include. Great. And then from the Australian Dietary Guidelines, Jady, what are the things we should absolutely avoid?
Yeah, I would say definitely. Alcohol will probably be one of them, and also anything which has all the added fats, salts, and sugars. So unfortunately, all the cakes and biscuits and ice creams, all the things we love, we don't really want to have too much of them because they're not very good for us.
Okay. And would you include in that what would your recommendations be about meat? Can we have as much meat as we want, or what are your thoughts on that, Jady?
With the meats, the ones that we don't want are the processed meats. So these are basically our deli meats, things like the ham, the bacon, salamis. What we do want in our diet are the lean meats. So this can range from various different kinds. We've got things like your red meat, so your beef, pork, lamb. You've got things like your chicken. You've got things like your fish as well. Non-vegetarian alternatives, non-meat alternatives. We've got things like the nuts and seeds. We've got things like tofu, things like baked beans, legumes, lentils. So those are the more healthy options. And generally speaking, most people need approximately about 2 to 3 servings a day, which will look something along the lines of a palm size is 1 serving, or approximately about a cup is a serving.
So Jady, that's 2 to 3 servings a day of protein, not of meat. So I know Aussies are really keen on their meat. We're not suggesting they have meat for breakfast, lunch and dinner, but just protein. So that might be, an egg for brekkie.
Correct. Yeah. We might do something like a lentil salad, which might be for lunch, and then dinner we might do something like fish and veg, or it could be chicken or beef and veg, something like that.
Yeah. Great. That's something certainly to be mindful of, that palm size amount of protein. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I want to ask a bit of a personal question here, Jady. What are 3 foods that you love that are really nutritious and that you wouldn't be without in your diet personally?
Yeah. I would say with summer being around currently here, I really do love mangoes. So that will probably be my favorite fruit. I would suggesting a lot of veggies. I think with it being quite hot, I quite like salads. So things like lettuce, spinach will be another one. And I would say, it's really hard to pick. I do like my whole grain bread, so the whole grain sourdough breads, they're quite nice as well to go with everything. And of course, who doesn't like all the discretionary foods that we shouldn't have? But I'm glad there's a lot to pick from the 5 healthy food groups, let's put it that way.
I don't know what you do, Jady, but for me, I just try and fill up on the healthy stuff so that I'm less tempted with the other things. Yeah. And personally for me, just I love things like tahini. I love avocado. I love banana. It's such an easy, quick, on-the-go snack food. I, like you, I love a really, really good sourdough multigrain bread. I love that.
Oh, delicious. Yeah.
Okay, so I think all of our listeners would love to have a healthy diet, and we all know that it's so easy to deviate from that, isn't it? For a multitude of reasons. How can we start to make healthy choices, particularly for people who've got MS and they've got limited energy and possibly busy working mum or dad, career person or not, but people can also be short on time?
Yeah, I think it's something we can all relate to some extent. And I would say in terms of the healthy choices, the first thing is actually understanding what we consider a healthy choice. And I think one of the main things that most people would have heard of at some point in time is something along the lines of the plate model. So what this plate model looks like is a dinner plate size, and having half that dinner plate containing some sort of vegetables and salad, a quarter of that plate containing some sort of protein, and also a quarter of that plate containing some carbohydrates. And then we take a step back and go, okay, then what are some things we can do for each of those 3 components on the plate? Starting off with the veggies and salad. we're aiming for half a plate of these types of foods. These days, we can get a lot of pre-prepared. We can get washed salad packs from the supermarket. There's a lot of pre-chopped vegetable packs, which makes things nice and easy for us. We just grab and go from the fridge. There's a lot of frozen microwavable veggies as well. Some of them come in the little packets where we just put in the microwave and it's all good to go. There's also tinned vegetables. We also have things like fresh vegetables as well, which we can actually pre-prepare when we have a bit more time and then use it as we go throughout the week if we happen to be busy. So that makes up half our plate. The next quarter of our plate, we've got our lean protein or some sort of meat alternative. And with these particular types of foods, we've got various kinds of tinned meats, legumes, lentils. We've also got frozen microwavable meats. Sometimes we might have leftovers left over that we can actually throw in with a bit of salad as an example. And the last component, we've got a quarter of the low GI carbohydrates. And this might include things like microwavable rice, things like whole grain breads, wraps as well. So there's some simple options that we can actually get from the supermarket or from home quite easily. If those are a little bit hard because we have to think of a couple of components, there are a lot of good ready meal options available in the supermarket as well. So what you may have noticed when you've gone in are things like on the shelf, there are refrigerated soups. There's meals on the shelf, like the tuna and the rice packets. There's also like the frozen convenience meals as well. And sometimes we could even get food from the meal delivery companies. And we're a similar thing. We think back to the plate model. Sometimes if we take a look at the soups, they might only contain like the meat and the veggies. So maybe combining that with a bread roll. And sometimes with the tuna and rice, we're missing the veggies. So we might be able to get a microwave sachet of veggies into that as well. We've got our complete plate model ready to go.
Jady, that's really good advice. And I'm not a big shopper, but even I notice in the supermarket now there's some really healthy ready-made meals. And for me, when I am cooking extra and popping it in the freezer for those nights that I'm too tired to cook is invaluable, isn't it? So that's great.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I know a lot of people are interested who've got MS about what fats they should or shouldn't eat ideally. And we've touched on that a little bit already, but I know, I understand that eating omega-3 is anti-inflammatory and that can be useful for people with MS. So what foods would you recommend, Jady, that are rich in omega-3s, in that particular unsaturated fat?
Yeah, excellent question. So as we sort of mentioned before, the omega-3s are usually found in the plant-based products. So we think of these as the nuts and seeds, the fatty fish, any fats and oils which are associated with any of the nuts and seeds that we've talked about. So things like peanut oil, we've got sesame oil, we've got flaxseed oil, so sunflower, canola, olive. So there's a range of different oils in the supermarket that we use these days. Interestingly, we do have eggs, which might be enriched with omega-3s as well. Certain breads and cereals can be also fortified with omega-3s. So these days we've got quite a bit of a range where we might be able to get some of these omega-3s from.
Okay, that's great. And there's lots of news about the gut microbiome and some research that does look encouraging for people with MS to improve their gut microbiome. I think we all benefit from that. What are your suggestions around that, Jady?
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting area. There's a lot of emerging research at this point in time. Unfortunately, there is still so much we can learn in this area. At the moment, the best way to achieve the healthy gut microbiome is actually to follow the Australian dietary guidelines. So having plant-based foods, things like your fruit, your veg, your whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, these are the foods which actually contain the nutrients that feed the microbiota. They really love things like dietary fiber, polyphenols and omega-3 fatty acids. So relating to the previous question you've asked. Other foods, fermented foods. So we've got sauerkraut, things like kimchi, yogurt, and sourdough bread can also be beneficial as well. And interestingly, following the Australian dietary guidelines, having regular consumption of foods such as the saturated fat, salt, and sugar, they don't really like those sort of foods. So it's very interesting how everything seems to follow a general pattern in that sense of what we're having. Yeah, so things that we associate with being good for us are actually really good for our gut microbiome, and things that we know aren't particularly very good for us aren't very good for the gut microbiome as well.
I know typically, Jady, you mentioned fibre as a means of feeding the gut microbiota. I know most of us don't eat enough fibre, and then when we do think about it, we plunge straight into the bran or something and get bloated. What do you recommend as good sources of fibre for people listening who might want to increase that in their diet?
Yeah. So with the fiber side of thing, we do find it in fruit. We do find it in all our veggies as well, and also in our whole grain type foods. So all our high fiber, brown breads, rice, noodles, pastas, things like wraps all contain fiber. So having a little bit of everything will be beneficial.
Great. What about supplements, Jady? What are your thoughts there?
Yep. So with the supplements, I usually recommend supplements for individuals who might potentially have a deficiency, or if they are unable to have the amount of food to get the nutrients, or in special circumstances where there is actually increased need. So in which case things like pregnancy, or if you've had surgery, we actually need a bit more nutrients to heal. In terms of generally taking supplements, I don't usually recommend it, more because we don't know whether or not these supplements are going to be beneficial or not. And I would say one of the best ways of figuring out whether or not we actually have a deficiency or not is actually through a blood test.
Okay. So, Jady, the $1 million question, how do we build these healthy habits for life, really?
Great.
How do we eat
question.
well? How do we stay on the wagon? Tell us your tips.
Yeah. It's definitely hard, because I think a lot of us, generally speaking, know what we need to do in terms of eating, what we should be having and what we don't have. But I think one of the hardest things is actually getting onto it and actually sustaining this, like you said, in the long term as well. And building habits is not very easy. It does actually involve a couple of steps that we may not necessarily know or think about. And I would say one of the best things to do first is actually know what we are doing. So increasing that awareness, generally by keeping a food and drink diary, which I think a lot of us have done at some point in time. And the good thing about this is this gives us a bit of an idea of what we might be having throughout the day. It also allows us to become aware of any habits that we've got. So some of us might be skipping meals because we're too busy, or we might be eating due to stress or boredom. And then once we become aware of these habits, we start thinking, okay, exactly what's actually triggering this? Why are we actually doing this? And once we've actually become a lot more aware of this, we actually reflect on what we actually can do as well. So if it's something that we can actually change, or if there's something we can actually modify, and that way we could actually replace some of the unhealthy habits that we've got with the healthy ones. So an example of this might be, for example, we might have a tendency to skip meals, and this might be because we just forget, or we've had a busy day, or we just don't have something prepared beforehand, and so forth. And some of the strategies we can do work with this is having a meal prepared beforehand, or actually setting up a time to eat. And we start small, we start with one day and then progressing to maybe doing it for the rest of the week. And just keeping in mind that habits do take time to develop. So celebrate when you do achieve the new habits, but also be kind when we fall trapped, because those things do definitely happen. And use it as a bit of a learning experience on what we can actually do better next time. And you know what? The more often you fall off, then the more often you actually get back on track, the better you become at it. And you actually don't think about it anymore. You just wake up, do your thing, and so forth. And that's when you know, yep, we've actually got the new habit in place.
Oh, that's great advice, Jady. And I must admit, I try to eat well, and a couple of things that I've found have been useful for me is, one, cleaning out my pantry, so only having stuff around me that I'm happy to eat. If I've got to go to the shop for that chocolate urge, I'm likely not to pursue it. So that really helps. Surrounding myself with good stuff, and then, as you mentioned, trying to be mindful of what triggers you to reach for the treats. So I do things like not putting them at eye level, not having them out so that I can see them. So hiding them from myself is helpful. But I've noticed things like if I'm doing it, because I'm working from home predominantly, if I'm doing a task that I think, oh God, I've got to do that bit of admin or something, then I'll reach for a treat or something to get me through that task. So I'm trying to change that habit. And then I also notice that point at night, say 9:30, that I'm tired and I perhaps should just head to bed and read or something. And that's also a vulnerable time where I might think, oh, I'll reach for the chocolate. It's actually where my energy is dipped. So it is really interesting learning what your triggers might be. And it's generally not because you're hungry or you need that food. There's often other triggers, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time, we might even give ourselves a bit of a hard time about it. So it's like, I know I shouldn't be doing it, but I'm still doing it. And it all comes down to basically some of the environmental factors. Like you said, with having food in the pantry, and if the food's not there, I probably wouldn't go for it. And it also comes down to, some of the habits that we have. And I think one of the ones that I've seen in the past was somebody who'll go shopping a couple of times each week, and their habit was they had to fill up the grocery bag. And so they get everything that they need. And they're like, oh, I've actually got a bit of space left in my bag. You know what? The chocolate's on sale, the chips on sale. And they like putting that right in the front when you start paying. So you fill up the rest of the bag. And that's how sometimes the food get at home. And once that particular person actually realized, oh, I'm actually doing that, they actually made the changes to stop. So it's very interesting in that sense. Sometimes the environmental factors and the habits play such a big role.
Yeah, I think so. And the old adage of not going shopping when you're hungry, I think is definitely a good one because and you can't rely on willpower, can you? You have to come at it from a place of self-care and kindness and a desire to want to nurture and nourish and look after yourself, because I don't know what it's like for you, Jady, but my willpower has only a very small life. It doesn't last very long.
Same here. And I would say, particularly when it gets busy and we're time limited and towards the later part of the night, it just tends to decrease, doesn't it?
It definitely does. Especially if you've got somebody else in the household who's not a good influence. What about setting goals? Will that help for people to stay on track and reinforce what they want to do? And how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that most people might have heard of is maybe setting SMART goals. And setting SMART goals means we know exactly what we're doing. We can actually measure what we are trying to achieve as well. So as an example, what we mean by SMART is, number one, specific. So what I want to do in that sense, what do I want to achieve? The second thing is being measurable. So making sure it's something that you can actually hold yourself accountable as well. Making sure it is attainable. So you've got the time, you've got the resources, you've got the tools to achieve your goal, making sure it is realistic. So even if it's something quite small, that's a lot more achievable than making a very big goal, which might be very hard to do. And also it's time limited. So we actually know when we're starting, how often we're doing this, and when this goal might actually potentially end. So an example might be, for example, starting today, I'll eat half a plate of vegetables at dinner 5 days a week. So we know when we're starting, we know what we are doing. We're having the veggies. We know exactly how much to measure. We're having that half a plate as well. We know it's realistic. We also got the time frames involved. We're thinking, okay, we're starting from one meal out of the 3 main meals we might have in a day. So we'll see how we go with that.
I think that's a lovely goal that our listeners might like to consider if that's useful for them and for them to take on perhaps, but obviously really important to tailor it for yourself. Fantastic, Jady. Thanks for all the wonderful information. Can you just finish up for us now and just tell us a little bit about the MS New Dietitian service?
Yeah, definitely. So the MS Dietitian service is open to everyone who've got MS who would like support for their health and also well-being. It can be helpful with symptom management and also nutrition through the lifestyle as well. So it can currently be funded through your NDIS plan or privately. And what people usually come out with is a personalised plan to actually suit your goals, suit your lifestyle. It is one one-on-one, so you can actually ask any questions you want, judgment-free. There's no bad questions. Every question is good. And hopefully we can empower you to actually plan, prepare healthy meals. We'll give you the education and support, whatever you might need. And some common things might be things like recipes, shopping lists. It could be takeaway meals. It could be using diet to manage medical conditions and so much more. Currently, this service operates once a fortnight on a Thursday. It can be by telehealth, so you can be anywhere, or in person at the Lidcombe office. So very exciting.
Oh, that's great, Jady. Fantastic service. How do our listeners book in?
Yep. Calling up MS Connect, the number's 1800 042 138, and they'll be able to answer all your questions and get you connected.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jady. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I know there's heaps more information you can give, and just encourage our listeners to book in if they'd like to pursue that line. Thanks for your time today, Jady.
Thank you so much. It was very exciting. Yeah. And it's lovely to be able to do this together.
It is. And it's great that people can listen as they're unpacking the dishwasher or driving or whatever they happen to be doing. So thanks, Jady. Yeah. And just also for our listeners, just to remember, there's more diet-related information on our website. There's an interactive nutrition tool that they can access at ms.org.au. And we have got recorded webinars, none of which I'd advise you doing when you're driving or unpacking the dishwasher, but you can sit down and have a look. We've also got a webinar on the gut microbiome, so a bit more information there. They're all in our webinar library. If you have specific MS concerns or queries, please get in touch. We're here to support you. You can speak to a nurse advisor or a social worker, or if you'd like some peer support, we can connect you to somebody in a similar situation. We can support you with employment, NDIS. We'd love to hear from you and support you. So that number again is MS Connect 1800 042 138. That's the gateway to all of our services. And last but not least, I want to extend our thanks to Darcy and his team at Podcast Productions for their generous support in producing our podcast. Thanks again, Jady, and thanks for your company today.
Thank you. Bye for now.